Hello, everyone. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes as people join the session. I want to welcome you all today. And we are so glad that you made the time to be here. We hope this is going to be a really informative session for those of you, especially who may be considering a equipment or facility move in the next near or distant future. All right, just a couple housekeeping things as we get into the session today. We will be sending a copy next Monday of the presentation and the recording. And also, for those who do stay the full session, and there's a survey at the end. And if you take the time to fill in, it's about 5 questions on that survey, we will be sending you a little thank you in the mail. So make sure to stay on and fill that survey out in the end. Also, as you go ahead and through the session, if you have questions, please go ahead and type them anytime in the questions box on the control panel. And we will be answering questions towards the end of the session. As you will take additional questions at the end, but as you think of them, go ahead and type them in. If you have any technical difficulties throughout the session, you can reach out via chat, and we'll do the best we can to help you with that. Okay, I think we've got most everyone who's at least starting in the session right now. And so let's get rolling. We would like to welcome you and thank you for taking the time today to join us for how life science companies plan effective relocation validations. This is a brief session today, but there's a lot of information, brief presentation, but a lot of information to cover. And we've left lots of time also to make sure we can answer your questions as best as possible. All right, and Regina, if you want to forward to the next slide.
Sure. Oh, wait. Wait, this is not the right slide. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. I have the incorrect PowerPoint up, apparently.
Right presentation, wrong version.
Exactly, right presentation, wrong version. So one moment while we deal with this technical difficulty. First of all, let me stop sharing for a moment. And then I can get out of this.
Oh, I forgot to mention, if you guys are here with a team, please let us know. We like to give you a shout out. We love it when we see that a whole team's on, and that's awesome. So just want to give you a shout if you're on the session.
Okay, now I can go to the next slide.
Awesome.
There we are. And there I am.
We want to make sure we get the introduction right, Regina. Want to give you credit here. Okay, so if you guys have been with us in previous sessions, you know Regina. She is our guru of all things RAQA. As far as her background, she has an amazing background. She helps assist our clients in the medical device and pharmaceutical industries and help them to achieve ever-increasing compliance to regulations in pharma, medical device, and related industries. Within her role here, she is one of our head content writers. She tracks industry trends and is constantly helping clients to improve their product quality. She is a certified quality engineer, a certified quality auditor, a certified manager of quality organizational excellence with ASQ, and she also holds a regulatory affairs certification for medical devices with RAPS. And if you come next month, I bet there'll be something else there. So thank you so much, Regina, for giving us your time today. When she is not out helping clients, she's helping to forward our pursuit of educational excellence in the life sciences industry. So we appreciate your time. And without any further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Val. That's wonderful, wonderful introduction. And I am not studying for any further certifications at the moment, so I don't know about next month having anything new, but I appreciate the kudos. So you are here to learn about how to prepare and how to execute a life sciences validation relocation. And so, the first step is, of course, planning. And then we have to do some risk management. Then there's an actual moving process and what we got to do when we qualify it. And then we'll just kind of discuss the final thoughts and, of course, your questions, which is not specifically here, but that's where the final thoughts are. So I like to use like kind of a roadmap analogy here. So, like he's saying, in preparing for battles, he always found that plans are useful since planning is indispensable. It's like a roadmap where you know where you're going and you have a plan for how you're going to get there. But if a road is closed, you at least know where the detours are. And it's very similar to that kind of a thing. Because all plans do go sideways, but it's good to know where you're going. And the other thing that's going on is that plans involve assumptions. And a lot of times those assumptions may or may not be true, but they are helpful. And while we're here, like kind of on the topic of Dwight D. Eisenhower, you may have seen a matrix that's similar to this with Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But it wasn't his idea, really. It was Dwight Eisenhower's idea, where he said, I have 2 different kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. And so what we really want to do, how Covey has always talked about is that, these things that are in this matrix of, not urgent, not important, is eliminate. And what's fantastic about a relocation qualification is that is an opportunity for cost savings. So whenever you see something that's not very important, not very urgent, that's an opportunity for cost savings. It's also an opportunity for thinking about new ways of doing things. In this urgent and important quadrant, that's the do, but really what we want to say is these are the things you do yourself. These are things you do within your organization. These are things that you do that that matter to how specifically you get them done yourselves. Maybe they involve intellectual property that you don't want to share with outsiders. Maybe it involves a very specific way of doing things. These are the things you do on your own, and you do them immediately. And of course, in this case, they give the example of project planning. You need to do that up front. And then there's other things that you'll be scheduling. You schedule things for later, and we'll get into the details of scheduling, but these are important things that you have to plan for, and when you're going to do them and when you're going to fit them in with each other, because as you know, things get busy, and if you didn't schedule them in, it's really hard to fit them in later after you have your schedule already full. This quadrant here about delegation, these are the things that either you can't do yourselves or things that it's going to be too hard. You're going to be very, very busy in this equipment movement situation. You're going to be dealing with contractors who are building the new facility. You're going to be involved with people who are service people for the instrumentation that's getting relocated. You're going to be contracting with bonded and certified, bonded and insured movers, because you want to make sure that a lot of times that's very delicate instrumentation is not damaged in transit. And then, of course, you'll be dealing with companies like our company. We are consultants that will help you on that validation journey and to help you do the planning. And you may also want to be delegating some of your project management to somebody who's like more of a professional project manager. The other things you might want to consider delegation is delegation within your company, to your metrology department, delegation to your maintenance department, delegation to your R&D department, who may be making use of this elimination task here, where they want to implement, as long as you're relocating, you may as well consider some process improvements that eliminate unnecessary steps in your manufacturing process. So there's a lot of delegation also involved in this, because an equipment move is such a huge monumental task. There's no way you're going to be able to do all of it yourself. So when you do this, you have to begin with the end in mind. It's similar to that roadmap thing. Like, I want to drive to next week. I want to drive to Boston. So I have an end in mind. I know exactly the address where I want to end up at. I know when I'm going to be leaving. I know my itinerary for my travel. I also have to be open to detours and changes of plan. So, in a similar situation, if you're in a company, you need to have a budget for those incidentals, for those unexpected things. If I get, in my situation, I want to leave myself plenty of extra time in case I get caught in traffic or in a detour or something like that. So, some fun little things to think about is, what's your new site going to be named? And the reason why I actually put that question is that when you're writing your site validation master plan, you have to be able to give your old site a name and your new site a name. When it's moving from point A to point B, what are you calling point A? What are you calling point B? So everybody has a common ground as to what that's going to be called. And who's going to be doing the moving? Do you have one moving company? Do you have a different moving company for some kinds of things versus other things? Like, you might have a moving company for the office furniture. That's not really going to be much of a quality impact. But then you'll maybe have another moving company who will be moving your calibrated and scientific instrumentation. Why do you need to move? Are you getting overcrowded? Is there something about the site design that doesn't facilitate for a new product line you're launching? The why kind of informs the purpose for the move. And then, are you going to be moving everything? Or are you only moving some things? Are you doing like more of an expansion where you're going to take one part of the business and relocate it, and you're going to just expand the current business that's staying there into the old location? And then, you got to think about what needs to move first and what needs to move last. So that kind of segues into, creating a project plan. And so the way that I've seen this work, and it's worked very well for numerous projects, is that we start with just sticky notes on a wall and say, okay, we're going to be moving this, and then we're going to be moving that. And in order for this to go, we have to have these other prerequisites. And you're moving a lot of things on the wall, and you might get involved at like a whole bunch of different stakeholders. You'll bring in your manufacturing folks, you'll bring in your validation folks, you'll bring in you bring in your QA folks, you bring in your regulatory folks, and because a lot of them understand what the prerequisites are in their little functional silo, and not everybody has a full picture of everything that's going on. So by creating like, here is the wall where we have the official sticky notes, come out when you have, you know, a couple hours in your schedule and play around with resticking them into different things. You know, you just kind of break things down into months, whatever, on the wall, and say, we're going to be, this is not something that's a short-term thing. We're talking about relocating an entire facility into a new building. And the building could be, you know, across the street, but it could be across the country too. So this is going to require a lot of advanced planning. It's going to take a long time. So get those people saying, okay, this needs to happen first, and you just move them around and people talk. You need to plan where your slack time is. And again, plan for that extra money, because it's like knowing that something's going to go wrong. You don't know what it is yet. So, you know, that's something that we want to talk about. Then we, you know, when we talk about memorializing that final plan in a project schedule, this is a point where you need to decide if you need to hire a third-party project manager to take all that information and plug it into a Microsoft project or whatever project scheduling tool that they use to identify the schedule and then communicate it across all those stakeholders to make sure that everybody is on board with what the plan is. And then the last thing you'll need to think about after you create the plan is you're going to need to create change controls. This is a really significant change, and somebody needs to be identifying how you intend that change to be documented. Are you going to do one ginormous change control with a bunch of little change actions? Are you going to have 50 little change controls with fewer change actions? Or are you going to have something in the middle, like, I don't know, 5 change controls, one for facilities, one for utilities, one for equipment, one for process validations, one for regulatory actions, and then you group it that way. So thinking about how that works in your organization, because every organization is different and there's advantages and disadvantages of each, and just need to think about how that works for you. So now you have your general plan, and you have maybe a change control written. Now what you need to do is you need to draft your validation master plan. And the validation master plan is just like your regular validation master plan, and you can leverage a lot of that information because we're making the assumption here that all the equipment that you're relocating from point A to point B has already been validated to some extent. And that all you're trying to do is to show that the validation continues to be relevant in the new location. So the first thing is to say what's moving and what's staying, because if you're just taking some systems and moving them and keeping other ones there, you need to maybe split those validation master plans into site A and site B. And then a lot of times these relocations are associated with introduction of a new product line, which means that an old system may be repurposed to something new. And that's going to carry with it more risk than if you're just taking the equipment and moving it from point A to point B, and you're going to continue using it for the same thing that it's been used for all along. So we need to understand that, and that needs to be built into the validation master plan. And then you want to involve those system owners and those user groups to help you make some kind of a risk assessment or to identify what those changes are going to be if it's more than just relocation, because they might identify opportunities for improvement. And I want to make this really clear because you can save a lot of money by thinking about those opportunities for improvement. For instance, I'm working on a validation transfer right now. And during the time that we're relocating the process, we're looking at what the process was and we're saying, why is it done in this order? We could save a lot of time and money in the process and shorten the process from like a 4-day process and shorten the time frame to maybe a 2-day process by adding these extra equipment features and changing our order of addition when we're compounding this product. So there may be some process validation changes that you'll be making in that situation, and that's okay. This is the time to do it. You now have an opportunity to introduce cost savings. As long as you're spending this money for a relocation, you may as well find ways to get that move to pay you back. So those are the situations you want to think about. Now, the other thing you want to think about is the design transfer or technology transfer plan. So this is going to be a legal requirement if you're a medical device. There's a because these types of moves affect your design and development, and of course, design control is a requirement for medical devices. But we want to even consider this situation even if you're a pharmaceutical product, because this is really a technology transfer. So it is worthwhile to discuss it as a tech transfer and to figure out those opportunities you have for improvement there. So now that you've leveraged the old VMP, now you'll want to develop a new VMP for the site. So we don't need the perfect to be the enemy of the good in a validation master plan. A validation master plan should be a living document. Yes, you want to get it as good as possible on your first try, but it doesn't need to be perfect. The other things you might want to consider is recalibrations. And is recalibration potentially sufficient to establish that your equipment is suitable in its new location? It might be, but that needs to be discussed through risk assessment, and we'll get into that later. So we also want to talk about the compliance issues. Are there certain timings that you need for like regulatory clearances, and how is that validation plan outlining that? And of course, we want to build in flexibility into that plan. And there's two ways of being able to do it. And that is, of course, allowing it to be a changing living document. But the other thing is that you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into requirements that aren't necessary. So I would strongly suggest that you understand the risks, and if right now the plan is nebulous about how you're going to do it, you don't necessarily have to spell that out up front, unless there's a cost consequence for it or other reasons why those things need to be spelled out so you can facilitate proper cross-functional communication or something like that. But in the end, we talked about that design transfer plan. This validation master plan needs to tie in with the with the design transfer plan and needs to tie in with the change controls that you wrote. And it needs to tie in with risk management. So I thought that this quote was very appropriate because we don't always concentrate on the risks. Now he's talking about, breaking the sound barrier. His result was, I want to break the sound barrier in this flight. I'm not worried about whether I'm going to die. But we do know that you manage those risks. You don't just say, if I die, I die, I don't care. You do everything you can to protect yourself and your patients in this case. So concentrate, understand your risks and mitigate them. But you're going to have to push through and do the work. So for your risk management guidelines, you first want to understand your highest risk issues. So you want to look at your system's original risk assessment. You probably, again, we're making the assumption that some of this equipment, at least some of it and most of it, already had some kind of risk assessment associated with it. Where were your riskiest equipments? What were your riskiest processes? What product has the greatest patient impact? Excuse me. What products are regulated? Are there some products that are regulated and other ones that aren't? And then of the regulated products, are there some that are life-sustaining and others aren't? So you want to think about, how does that process affect the worst case product? Can you use that one worst case product to be a test case for all? And can you put that in your validation master plan about understanding that, okay, the worst case process that takes place on this piece of equipment is this one, and if we qualify it for that, we know that it's going to be suitable for its intended use for the others. So there may be just one performance test that kind of is, indicating of that equipment's continued suitability. You can do that. Like in my example is freezers and refrigerators. So we had an interesting situation, and we were in a climate that's cold in the winter, and we decided that it would make the most sense if we decided to move our freezers and refrigerators in the dead of winter. And that way we would have the least impact of the move. And we decided that it might even make sense if we kept those refrigerators and freezers loaded with the same contents they had all along. And we were able in transit to monitor the temperature inside those controlled temperature units. And then we get them plugged in and see if everything stayed stable from the time that we unplugged it in the first location to the point that we ended up in the old location. And then we had a limited amount of temperature mapping that we would have to do, because we had justified that if the temperature ends up being the same in the new location, we already said that the utilities were adequate and such, that we didn't really expect that many of those controlled temperature units would fall out of spec. One or two actually did. So that was a nice validation too, because we could show that that the method that we had planned was actually able to detect any anomalies. We also need to understand that if we're relocating from one location to the next, we're going to have some new systems in the new location, things that are hardwired, things that are put, utilities and facilities. Those don't move. We can relocate equipment, we can relocate a process, but you can't really relocate an HVAC system. You're going to be using a brand new HVAC system. Normally, you would qualify that HVAC system before you start moving any equipment into the room. So that's a prerequisite that you would consider in your plan. It's also a big risk that gets mitigated up front. You want to work with your regulatory affairs group because you want to talk about product registration requirements and site registration requirements, and your regulatory affairs group is going to have some guidelines on how to deal there. And then the really fun part here is to consider your creative ways to minimize risk. And some of these brainstorming sessions are really a lot of fun. So you want to think about, how can I make this fun? So a consultant that I worked with once before, and his main area of expertise was in innovation. And for his creative ways to minimize risk, or any kind of brainstorming session, is that this is how it works. First of all, make it a fun session. Get people in there and you're going to have fun. And the first thing you want to think of is, what would be a funny way to fix the problem? And then the conversation will devolve, or seemingly devolve, into a crazy way to fix the problem. Something that's completely off the wall and just get people laughing because it's just so silly. And then usually out of that craziness, somebody says, but wait, that's not too crazy. What if we did this instead? And then you have your aha moment. So if you are really stuck in a way to minimize your risk, or to minimize the amount of work, or to eliminate an unnecessary task, consider one of these brainstorming sessions that are just like fun, where you just get into a room and you're, drawing pictures on the whiteboard and laughing and joking, and boom, something happens. Make it fun. Make it a lunchtime session. Make it a session where I don't know, wear your silly hat or something like that. So just a word of encouragement there, that there are ways of being able to use risk management. You can use your typical FMEA, of course, but if you get really stuck and you don't want to use an FMEA, or you want to think about, how do I mitigate this, think of a creativity brainstorming session. Now, this is where the rubber hits the road, is in your actual move. And it is really painful, and it is a lot of labor. And but if you keep your eyes on the prize, and if you really think about what the payoff is going to be at the end, you end up going through it. So now you've done all this preparation. What's really important at this point is good project management, and making sure that everything's coordinated. You got your movers, your metrology group, your equipment owners, your validation, testing, and approval, and your QA signatures, and all that is like lined up. And you have a priority based schedule that accounts for the shifting timelines that change every day. There's going to be an element of unpredictability. You might have some equipment that's damaged in transit. You might have a moving truck that breaks down. You might have a back order of supplies. You might break equipment. People call in sick because we're in COVID. Things happen, but you know what your goal is. You know the direction you're going in. And because you have made that plan, and maybe have even made some contingency plans, you know what you're going to be doing. You also might have some slack built in your schedule. You want to use that to your best advantage. Having a great attitude and willingness to work is what will get you through. And that means you want to be kind to your coworkers. You're all going to be stressed. This is a very stressful period in anyone's work life. But don't turn your professional problems into personal problems. Understand that there are times to celebrate when you get through something that's tough. Remember to give each other the high fives. Remember to be your best self for your coworkers, and they will be their best selves for you in return. Use your area subject matter experts to spread out the workload so you can keep it simple. Maybe you don't know how that instrument works. That's okay. There's somebody out there whose job it is to operate that instrument day in and day out. Use their expertise. They can help you manage your life a lot better. And the last thing is, you know, keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And so it might be slower than you expected. It might be more work than you expected, but it's going to get done. And you just have to keep that good attitude going and keep in mind, how lovely is it going to be to come to work in this lovely lab that I'm setting up, where I have so much more area to spread out and do my job, and I can be so much more efficient and get things done faster. And that's what you got to just keep on keeping that vision alive in your head as to what you're going to be doing once this headache of moving is over. And we can minimize that headache. So, you know, I'm going to go through this by IQ, OQ, and PQ, because those are your general qualification things that you're going to be going with. Okay, in your IQ, you are going to have new utility hookups. You can't get rid of that. You may end up having to revise all your SOPs if the old location is listed in there. If it has an address that doesn't apply anymore, you're going to have to update that SOP or keep it vague. You're going to have to recalibrate those instruments in the new location, because jostling the instrument can disturb its settings. You're going to have to maybe inspect for shipping damage. You want to do a safety inspection to make sure that, you know, God forbid, there's no dangers in the new location. And you want to make sure that if you have new personnel at this new site, like if you are moving to a different town and now you have brand new set of personnel working there, that they're appropriately trained for this new process. But when you do these IQs and you've done your risk assessment, you will have also identified those things that you can eliminate from your IQ checklist. You want to potentially eliminate the need for new manuals. You have the old manuals for your equipment. You don't need new ones. You can eliminate the needs for drawings, assuming that it's a drawing of the piece of equipment. There are things that you can eliminate and say, we accept that. We're only going to qualify the things that change with this equipment. And that's where you do this in your IQ. And similarly for the OQ, you only want to qualify the things that have changed. So if you know what your dependencies are, and you know there's going to be alarms and interlocks that might be different at the new site, like for instance you have a building management system and airlocks that that are needed for that equipment to move to operate properly, qualify those. But if the equipment hasn't actually operationally changed, you might want to check something like a performance test, an operating indicating test, like a linearity test, where you put in some standards and verify that it's appropriately linear to the right correlation coefficient. But you may not need to do a full qualification. You're doing a spot check to ensure that the equipment is still functional in its new location. You want to make sure that the change actions that you've put in your change control are also valid. But we don't need to do a full OQ. Look at the high risk things and then qualify those. And then, of course, for the PQ. PQs or process validations are a special case because you might have numerous processes that are assigned to that piece of equipment or to that system. Can you do some kind of a bracketing study? Can you choose one worst case situation and use that one as a signal of the performance attributes across all? For example, in a cleaning validation, you choose your worst case soilant, and then you verify that the cleaning process will clean that. Can you do something similar for a PQ on a piece of equipment for, let's say, a purification process? Can you choose the hardest to purify substance and use that one as an example for maybe a specific column? When you do PQs, they are used usually on simulated, which is not as common, or actual product manufacturing situations. Remember that those manufactured products are going to be on hold pending completion of the associated PQs, meaning that you're going to have to wait till post-approval of those qualifications. You're going to have time for data collection, sign-offs, and could go back and forth a few times. Again, sign-off parties are a lovely situation for this, where you can resolve your issues in one meeting, get the document picture perfect with all the affiliated parties in one room and get it done all at once. At the end of your qualification, you're going to have to close out all your change controls. There's going to be some regulatory stuff before you'll actually be able to sell product. Even if it's taken off hold, you won't be able to sell until at least your regulatory clearance is done. And maybe change controls, maybe there's a change action in there that allows you to sell product before the whole change control is closed. But you need to be careful about how you word those things and how you actually execute. And so now we're in the final thoughts. Mostly a summary here. Advanced planning for an equipment strategy or equipment move will save you time, energy, cost, and headache. I will add that, and headache. You want to manage your cost overruns through effective planning, but they are going to be there. They are going to happen. There's going to be something unexpected that happens. You cannot say that's all we're spending and that's it. You need to build into your budget some unexpected expenses. It's going to resemble a tech transfer or a design transfer or initial validation program in some cases, but you can eliminate tasks that are redundant. You can use your tech transfer as a way of eliminating costly tasks that are not value added. And in this way, it's paying for itself in some ways. And that means that your user groups can use that relocation as an opportunity for improvement. And so you want to take those users' opinions into your, bring them into your group, get feedback from the actual users, because they, making them happy. It's not only having a new, beautiful work facility to work in, but it's in the end, you want people happy with their jobs. And right now, in our situation with our Great Resignation, you want to keep people as happy as possible. And you can save a lot of costs through risk assessment, so you understand what's essential and what's non-essential for that new location. And at the very end, when you do that move, the final push at the end is going to be exhausting. A lot of times people say the last 10% is 90% of the work, but you have to keep your eyes on, hey, I'm going to be working in this really lovely place, and I get to really enjoy this brand new this brand new building that they've constructed that's, you know, state of the art and beautiful materials and a lovely place to come to work. So keeping those in mind kind of helps you to motivate your team and motivate yourself to cut to the chase and be at the end. One other thing I just want to say here is that I had some beautiful, beautiful scenery pictures with some quotes, and I want to give credit to brainyquote.com, who was able to provide those wonderful things to me. And now we get to the Q&A section. There is a QR code that will allow you to follow our company, so that you can see what we're doing these days. Now let me see.
Absolutely.
And Val, I'd like you to help me
Yeah.
find these questions.
So for those who may have missed my announcement earlier, at the end, if you stay till the very end, which will be wrapping up here shortly, we do have a short survey that for those who stay and answer that, we'll be sending a little thank you in the mail. And so make sure to do that. A copy of this presentation will be sent out on Monday, as well as the recording. And for those who attended, there'll also be a certificate attached if you want to use that for any professional hours of any sort. So just a couple quick housekeeping reminders if you missed them earlier. We've got some great questions that have come in, and so we'll kind of kick that off. In regards to the QR code right there, if you follow that, use your camera, follow that, that'll take you right to our LinkedIn page, and you can you can get notifications then if we announce, when we announce upcoming webinars, when we share an article, things like that. So so definitely check that out. And to kick off some questions here, Regina, the first question is, what is the validation criteria for relocation of equipment in the same building?
So it's actually somewhat similar to that for, like, equipment that's being relocated to a new location. But since the move may not be as extensive, your risk assessment is going to be maybe showing fewer really needs for those changes. For instance, if you're just relocating a simple piece of calibrated equipment, maybe a recalibration in the new location is fine. If you're doing something that's more sophisticated, maybe a piece of equipment with more parts, you have to consider the risk. Everything is risk-based. We want to be risk-based. We want to be science-based. So if you can justify away some of those things, as we're just moving it from room 403 on the 4th floor to room 305 on the 3rd floor, and it's going to be located in a room with the same environmental requirements. It's going to be located, maybe it is as simple as plugging it in and recalibrating it. But that just needs to be assessed in a risk assessment, because every situation is different. But it may be less than if you're moving it across the country. So that's a consideration. And but you do want to do something, and there would be some kind of a change control involved. And it might be just something as simple as writing a change control and documenting that risk assessment as to what you're going to do. But it's case by case basis based on the risk.
All right. Next question is, do we have to do any regression testing for relocations of automated systems / servers, which we commonly do for a software change?
So again, it's kind of based on a risk assessment. So if you're relocating the software to a new server, and we actually did something similar to this recently for one of my clients. We had qualified it on server A in building A, and then in the middle of the validation project, they relocated to a new building. And so we verified that the software was on the new server, And then we didn't really do like a full regression test. But what we did do is, again, we did a check for, you know, those essential functions. You know, did we have the same amount of free space on that server? Did it meet all the requirements that we said that it had to meet in its new location? And then we did a spot check on some functions, on some functionality, and check to make sure that all that was the same. But if you're dealing with the same software version, you've already qualified it in one location, and now you're just moving it to a different server, different location, and you're potentially having the same users access it. You know, it also depends on, you know, for part 11, is it an open system? Is it a closed system? I'm assuming it's a closed system, because if it were an open system, you'd be accessing it via the internet and the actual native location of the software wouldn't change. So in your new location, you find some tests that will be indicative that the software meets its performance requirements in the new location. And after verifying that all the IQ systems are in place in that new location, you should be okay. If you see something that's like anomalous, you know, some kind of a software anomaly or error, I have seen where maybe the network in the new location isn't suitable, and that you may need to have some network updates, or you may need to focus on configuration. But I think a lot of this is configurational, and less so much with the software itself, but where it's being installed and the configuration.
All right. Great question. Thank you. All right. I think that may be all. I guess we're going to make a last call for any questions that you guys have.
And what I'd really like to focus on in this is that we want people to stay positive. A relocation, especially if you're relocating a whole building full of stuff, is a lot of work. And good news, job security. Bad news, you're going to have bad days. But it's just so important to stay positive, and you know, if there are questions, there are people you can reach out to. There are, you know, there's a team that you can work with, and it just makes your life so much easier to know that you're not alone in this, and that you're going to have a fantastic, lovely place to work after this initial quagmire of relocation is resolved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that's all the questions we have for today. If at any point you guys would like some more information about our facility and equipment validation, moving services, it's one of our specialties here at Compliance Team. Please reach out. You can reply directly to the emails you get from me in response to this session. You've probably already got a couple reminders and everything. Or, you know, reach out to us at solutions@compliancesteamllc.com, or just visit us online, and we've got a consultation link there. We've got lots of contact forms. So you can check us out at compliancesteamllc.com.
And I was also going to say, if you want to contact me directly, my email is right here, rfullen@compliancesteamllc.com as well. But solutions@compliancesteamllc.com will be great. If you want to respond to Val's, that's great too. Feel free. We are an open door here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for staying till the end. I believe the survey should launch right after I kind of wrap this up. And we'll see you next month for next month's session. Make sure to check your email or follow us on LinkedIn to get notice when that's announced. Have a great day, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.